The OER20 Quilt of Care and Justice sprang from the very wonderful experience of Galway 2019. Both OER19 and the theme of OER20 were inspirations for the establishment of the quilt project. There was planning for how people could contribute without necessarily sewing, and just before we launched we realised that the project belonged to OER20. Some of the early no-sew demos didn't go according to plan. The launch of the quilt project in late November attracted a lot of interest, and we had 33 promises of contributions to the quilt, but only 2 squares had arrived by the beginning of January. Anne-Marie Scott built a splot to receive the stories and images of the squares. Although deliveries kept coming, it was clear that not all squares would arrive by the deadline of the 30th of January. Quite a few people sent cards, stickers, and sometimes gifts with their contributions. The yellow and white bag is full of these. We received generous donations of backing fabrics right through the project: a plaid night dress from grad school days, leftover fabrics from previous projects. They were washed and ironed, then cut up for glorious backings for the quilt. The Macclesfield 7, including honorary member Suzanne Hardy, arrived at my house on the 22nd of February to stitch together what squares had arrived by then. We used a dead blue fabric for sashing and borders to show off the quilts to their best advantage. Even the sewing machine sported an OER20 sticker. The endless cataloguing was nearly over, and now we had 4 quilt tops that still needed to be backed and quilted. Some quilt squares and the quilts themselves needed QR codes. Production HQ moved out to the summer house where I could make a mess without disturbing others in the family. Backings were stitched and quilt sandwiches were made. Some very late squares arrived to occupy some of the blank squares. The size of the quilt was a problem. We had received 73 6 or 12-inch squares to the equivalent of 138 6-inch squares. We decided to make 4 quilts and worked out a way to fasten them together, with proof of concept being done on some scrap quilting. Finally, the binding was applied, experimenting with different fancy stitches to find one that looked best, and the first quilt was ready for a test hanging. Even though the quilts aren't finished, I am finishing this video with talking about the quilting, my favourite part of the whole quilt process. Free motion quilting is like drawing with a sewing machine, and it's a craft of imperfection. I think the quilting can bring the whole quilt alive, highlighting the important bits whilst giving definition across the design. But then I realised I had only ever quilted my own work, and now I was going to be quilting the work of other hands. I decided that I just had to treat each square separately and decide what I was going to do without too much prevarication. I would treat each square with respect for the work of its creator. I evolved an approach of outlining shapes and words and meandering across the white space. I got some enthusiastic responses and may never know if some are horrified by what I have done to their square. My learning takeaway is that a collective piece of work like the quilt requires a degree of trust between those who work at different stages of creation and assembly of an imperfectly beautiful or beautifully imperfect artifact. And the quilts aren't finished at OER20, but they will be. We must do what we can in these times.